Okay, welcome back. In session 4, we're going to talk about the promise lead. This is a little bit less direct than the offer lead. So what is a promise lead? It is something that gives the prospect right out of the gate a promise that they can't resist. This is a very common type of ad that everybody has seen, and probably at one time this was the type of ad that people wrote most of the time. If you think back to the 1920s, 1930s, things like that, where you saw, or in the 1800s, when you saw the little space ads in the newspapers or the little one-page magazine ads, they almost often took this approach. It was pretty much considered that's what an ad was. There's often a lot of confusion about the promise lead because we would rightly say that all kinds of promotions make promises. A promotion that doesn't make a promise is not offering some benefit to the reader, and no exchange for that what's in it for me, no answer to that what's in it for me question. So what is it that makes a promise lead so specifically different from the other kinds of sales promotions? When you have a promise that is so strong that you can target it to the reader, you can try putting that promise right up at the front. So that's the essential difference, is that the promise is right up there at the front to see if that promise is strong enough by itself to entice somebody who's in. This is usually somebody who is aware that they have a problem that they want to solve. They may even be aware of the solution that you have. They may even be aware of who you are. But you put that promise up the front, and it's really strong and really different from what they've heard anywhere else. David Ogilvy said, "Headlines that promise to benefit sell more than those that don't." This would be one of the rare occasions that I might disagree exactly with what David Ogilvy said, because there have been certainly other types of promotions, as we'll see going down the line, where the promise is a little bit more buried than that. There is a promise that shows up somewhere in the sales copy, but it might focus on some very big story or make some very big other problem solution leads, which we'll look at the next session. So where the promise might be hinted at rather than stated explicitly. However, what he certainly would be right about is that a very strong promise made somewhere in the promotion is going to be essential, and if that strong promise is very strong and you can direct it to the right audience, it can be a very effective way to sell. So here, if we look at that awareness spectrum, you might think a promise lead would land probably really somewhere in this part of the spectrum. If you've got people who are out there who are aware of who you are, aware of what the product might be, and they're solution aware, that is, that they know that there's something out there that could solve their problem. And maybe dipping a little bit further down, but it tends to be over here for a promise lead. So it's a little bit more direct. Here is a sample where it says, "You can grow new hair." That's a big, clear promise right up at the top. And anybody who's concerned about not having as much hair as they used to would read that, and you would make a promise to somebody, and that would be, hey, that's great. So you don't need to do a lot of anything else except put that promise right out there. So core claim is right out front. Or you make a promise of something that the prospect already strongly desires. This is actually sort of similar to that last sample. So here, Men's Health magazine, and really most health magazines that you see, most magazines that you would think of as like supermarket stand magazines as you walk out and you see them when you pass the counter, they most often have some kind of promise like this in these tiny little headlines. And it can be very valuable for you to go just in the supermarket next time, turn and look and see what they're promising on those little things, because they only have a certain amount of space, and they often try to use that space as best they can. And very often what they'll do is try and make a promise that's irresistible in just a few words. So here this goes through, what is it that men are concerned with? Last longer than any guy you know, rock star sex, the hard body diet, awesome abs, fat Terminator foods. So these are things that are stating or implying promises that are very direct to the things that they know that market already cares about. Maybe you have a situation where you can make a promise that is so strong that it stretches the limit of credibility just a little bit, that somebody wants to see you go ahead and prove that claim that you're going to make. So here's an example. This is from a financial information product. Imagine getting rich as ignored stocks soar. And it goes on through this lead to suggest to somebody that there are stocks there that nobody pays attention to, that nobody knows what the names are. They're completely different from these household name stocks that investors would be familiar with, Google, Apple, Intel, and the others. And those stocks can actually be more rewarding than the big name, popular household name stocks. Now, this might stand out to somebody who's new to this type of investing as something interesting, maybe a little bit shocking, so the claim is a little bit strong, and they want to go ahead and challenge you to go ahead and prove that. They'll give you a little bit of time to try and prove that, and if you do that successfully, they'll go on and continue through the lead. Or you may be in a situation where the product is something that people are very aware of, the solutions that you offer are something you're very aware of because there are many people that offer that. So here's an example from Southwest Airlines. People know what airlines do. They get you from one place to another. And pretty much they all fly on certain kinds of planes. It's pretty similar. How does somebody like Southwest stand out by comparison? Well, they changed what they did here, their offer. So this is slightly a mix of an offer and a promise lead, but your bags fly free. They're the only people that let you take your bags on without having to pay those extra fees now that you put it on the plane. And somebody realizes, well, that makes us unique in this marketplace, so we're going to highlight that and we're going to make a promise to you. You bring your bags, they're going to fly free. So here we see bit of an offer lead, bit of a promise lead mixed together, but both a direct approach to bring out there. So this USP idea, I want to stop and talk about that for a second. You hear that phrase all the time, USP, and most people know that stands for a unique selling proposition. But what does that really mean? That means that whenever you're going to make a promise to somebody in a promotion, if you're going to do it as your promise lead or you're going to do it later on, you know that that promise that you make to them can't be the same promise at the same level of quality or intensity or the same amount of benefit or a duplicate benefit as somebody else who's also going to make that promise. Otherwise, they're going to find a way to differentiate that somehow and gain an advantage over you. So you have to find out what it is that's unique, that it is that your product or service is doing. So that's an important thing. So you're going to watch for that when you are being sold something or you see sales pieces. Look through them. See if you can figure out what it is that makes that one thing very different from everybody else. An interesting story about this USP is that this came from a guy named Rosser Reeves. So he was doing an ad, and Rosser Reeves happens also to be the guy who went and helped craft the first ad for M&M candies. M&M candies, you know that the famous, I can't believe that it would be anybody in the world who don't know what M&Ms are, the most popular candy in the world. At one time, they were a war technology. So people were on the battlefield, and they needed to have food in their field kits that would give them quick energy. Chocolate was one of the things that the British soldiers had in their kits, but the problem with the chocolate was when you took it out in the battlefield, it melted, got all over your hands, and then got all over your gun equipment, and guns would jam, and it would actually cause a problem in fighting the battle. So somebody came up with this idea to put a little shell around the candy. Rosser Reeves went in, and he was sitting with the guy who was talking about the candy, and the guy was explaining the whole story about the war and about how the candy shell was there or whatever. And by the time he got to the end of the long explanation, he finally said, the thing is, they melt when they're in your mouth, but not in your hands. Rosser Reeves said, thank you. He went home. He waited a few days, so it looked like he was doing some work. And he went back to him and he says, I've got the slogan for M&M's candies. They melt in your mouth, but not in your hands. That became the slogan that they used for decades. It also made M&M's the most popular candy in the world. And what it did was differentiate that candy, highlight that unique difference, that unique promise that he could give to somebody else. So that's a unique selling proposition. The one thing that's important about when you make a promise or a claim, not only does it need to be different, it also has to be a very strong promise. That is a very bold promise. But it can't be so bold that it's impossible to believe. If it's too bold, then somebody will dismiss it as, well, that's ridiculous. And they won't give you time even to figure out what it is. So here's one. Amazing secret discovered by a one-legged golfer. Adds 50 yards to your drives, eliminates hooks and slices, and can slash up to 10 strokes from your game almost overnight. That's a pretty extreme claim for somebody who plays golf to be able to get that much improvement. But it's not so extreme that it could seem impossible or intangible. Once you do make those kinds of claims, big promise lead, the thing you're going to need to do, no matter what, is instantly prove that that promise is something you can deliver, that it's something real. One of the ways that you've seen this happen over and over is when you see the before and after ads that are very popular in health products, any kind of diet products, or in this case, this is one for helping improving the look of people's skin as it's aging, removing wrinkles. You're going to have to see that change taking place. So you immediately, one thing you need to know is when you make a big promise lead, you're going to follow it up with proof right away that that promise is real. Okay. Also, another thing that you need to do is when you make the promise, you're going to need to go back and revisit that promise. So the promise itself becomes an anchor where you attach that idea of the golden thread, and throughout you're going to have to come back and you're going to have to keep revisiting that promise, restating it many different ways so that that person realizes there's something in this for you, there's something in this for you. Remind them why they're reading it, why they're getting something out of it. This is just a table of contents from a Magalog, and it's finding many different ways to return to the idea of this is for an investing product, to making income in a bear market. So it's restated several different ways, but the main promise is that idea about making income, dividend income in a bear market. When you get to the final close, we talked about using the promise as a way to anchor that golden thread in the beginning, and then to return to it throughout, keep it taut, keep the line, the golden thread taut. Then you get to the end, and you're going to make an offer. And in that offer, you're probably going to make a guarantee to somebody that there's a satisfaction with the product. Well, a very effective way of writing that guarantee is to go back and restate that promise that you made at the front. So I guarantee that if you don't take away at least 10 strokes from your golf game within the first 3 months, or I guarantee that you're going to grow more hair in the first month of using this product, or the first 3 weeks, or I guarantee that you're going to lose the weight that I promised you're going to lose. Restating that in the guarantee helps bring that whole thing back together, and it closes that loop of the promise. So if you think about it like when you use parentheses on a phrase, you would never put the opening parentheses without putting the closing parentheses. Well, think about that in the copy. You're going to return back to that other part, and you're going to make a very satisfying close to that promise by putting it in the guarantee. Why is the promise lead so powerful when you can do that? As I said in the beginning, if you are able to zero in on that very unique, strong claim, you're going to be able to use it in all the other lead types that we look at. So, for instance, when we get to the story lead, you're going to see that many times people use a story to sell something, but that story will always imply some kind of very strong promise. So always return to that. If you can find a promise that's so strong and so clear and targeted to the right audience, that can often be a very strong way to get in. So here we have this sample of how to win friends and influence people. Very clear. Again, we talked about that when we were talking about the power of one. Very clear idea. There's no ambiguity about what you're going to get out of that book. So right away, it just telegraphs right to you what that big idea is in a claim all at once. So here's an exercise I want you to do. Go again to your mail. Go again to your inbox. Look for those ads that you get from different companies, and look for ads that come from similar companies, and compare them. See which one of them has a strong, unique selling proposition, a strong claim that nobody else is making or can make, and see which one of them manages to turn that USP into the strongest promise. Which one gets you thinking, I might actually want to try doing that, and go through and circle that promise. And you might even want to go through, if it's a nice long piece, and find the places that that promise is restated over and over again. And if they do that, then you can highlight where they are. But if they haven't done that, see if you can think of places where that promise could have been repeated. Go down to the guarantee, to the close, and see if there's a way that you could restate that promise in the guarantee. So in the next session, we're going to start moving towards leads that are even more indirect, and we're going to talk about something called a problem-solution lead. This is also a pretty common lead that you've seen around in different ads, small, short-form ads, long-form ads. We're going to talk about what that looks like, and I'll give you some tips on how that works. So thank you, and I'll see you in session 5.